The O'Reilly Factor's on tonight.
It's coming from a president who's fundamentally uncomfortable with being the leader of the free world.
Pressure growing on the Obama administration to take on the jihad and neutralize the Iranian nuclear program. Tonight we'll take a hard look at it with Charles Krauthammer.
This is a third world war by other means.
King Abdullah of Jordan trying to lead the world against the ISIS savages, but he can't do it alone. Will President Obama step up?
I'm Waters. This is my world right here.
You're big kind, ain't you?
Also ahead, Waters World, the Spring Training Edition.
You like it when I mess things up, don't you?
It's funny you don't get punched out.
Caution, you are about to enter the no spin zone. Factor begins right now. Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Danger overseas getting closer. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. Tomorrow, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address Congress talking about the Iranian nuke situation. This will be the third time Mr. Netanyahu has spoken to Congress. The only other man to do that, Winston Churchill. Now, the Iranian deal is very complicated. The Obama administration wants a settlement that would stop Iran from immediately developing a nuclear weapon. But critics say the deal is too soft, that Iran would continue its weaponization and could convert it to nuclear very quickly if it decides to break the agreement. Right now, it's impossible to know just how close the Iranians are to having a nuke. The Israelis believe they're very close. And the state of Israel says that is unacceptable because the Iranian mullahs want to wipe Israel off the planet. But President Obama has to negotiate on behalf of Americans, not the Israelis. And if the president walks away from the Iranian nuke deal, war might follow. It's certainly possible, so the stakes could not get any higher. One of the problems with all the discord abroad is the perception of President Obama himself.
This is a president who thinks America is the greatest threat to world stability. And I think our allies and our enemies have picked up on this. They see weakness, or they're concerned. Assad sees weakness. Putin sees weakness. Netanyahu is concerned, so concerned that he's coming to this country because he feels that we're going to cut a deal with Iran that is going to jeopardize the very existence of Israel, an ally of ours.
But again, it's hard to know exactly what treaty terms would prevent Iran from going nuclear. Therefore, commentators like myself have to be careful. Nobody wants World War III, and nobody wants Iran to get a nuke. But definitive statements about the treaty negotiations are hard to back up. On the other matter, ISIS expansion, it's easier. Simply put, President Obama is not leading the fight. King Abdullah of Jordan is.
This has to be unified. I mean, I've said this to leaders both in the Islamic and Arab world and to the world in general. This is a third world war by other means. This brings Muslims, Christians, other religions together in this generational fight that all of us have to be this together.
But with all due respect to the king, who is a courageous man, it will take America to galvanize the world against ISIS, and obviously that's not happening. All in all, the danger overseas growing. No question. And that's a memo. Now for the top story tonight reaction. Joining us from Washington, Charles Krauthammer. So am I making any mistakes, Charles?
Well, let me count the ways. Let me start with the big one, which is you seem to present the alternative as either we go through with these negotiations, which is essentially capitulation, or war, as if there is not a third way. Obama loves to argue this. He does it in Ukraine. What do you want besides capitulation? You want war? No. You supply the Ukrainians with weapons, and you apply sanctions. With Iran, we know what the alternative is. And that was the alternative that brought the Iranians to their knees and to the negotiating table in the first place. Sanctions, they were working. The GDP was cut by about a quarter. The real, the currency, the value fell by half. There's grumbling in the streets. The only thing that the mullahs care about more than acquiring a nuclear weapon is hanging on to power. And they know that the threat is economic.
Let me challenge.
Go ahead.
Yes, sanctions can hurt Iran. But if you believe the Israelis and the prime minister, they're that close to getting a nuclear weapon. And if this negotiation goes south, maybe they have it in 6 months. I've heard that 6-month figure bantered around. So the mullahs may be willing to take the economic pain for 6 months, use their secret police and Quds force to control the population, get the nuke. Israel's not going to allow that. He's not going to allow the nuke to get done. And they're going to attack Iran, which then, as you know, blows up everything. Again, am I wrong?
Yes, you're wrong, because the objective, the best case scenario under America's terms that are being offered to Iran right now is that Iran is a year away from war, from developing a nuclear weapon.
A year, they say.
A year, so we got a 6-month difference. And do you think we're going to know about the development of the bomb if we negotiate the year? It could be 6 months, it could be less. The IAEA, the UN agency that inspects, reported last week and again today that it has no way to assure the international community that Iran is not cheating and developing a weapon right now as we speak. The inspections aren't going to work. So even if we conclude the agreement, they are at best going to be a year away. But here's the worst part. The agreement has a sunset clause, which means that after a period, it could be about 10 years, Iran will be completely unrestrained, can enrich as much as it wants. It can have an industrial level of uranium enrichment to create an entire stockpile of any uranium it wants. And it will do so with the blessing of the West and with complete legitimacy.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, they're saying they'd have to negotiate another deal well before then to constrain
they will not negotiate another deal. That's in the deal. There's a sunset clause. It expires and Iran is cut loose. And that is supposed to be an agreement that is in our interest?
Look, it's impossible to know, I think, how the agreement is going to be worded until we see it. But even President Obama today said he is pessimistic now. I don't know whether you saw this report. It came out in the late afternoon. He's pessimistic that Iran's going to even agree to the 10-year time frame to stop what they're doing. So it seems to me that the economic sanctions will have to be reimposed, and then Israel will have to decide what Israel wants to do.
It's not easy to reimpose sanctions. The original sin here was when Obama began these negotiations 18 months ago. He unbelievably, amazingly, relaxed the sanctions instead of increasing them. He has resisted Congress wanting to impose sanctions that would increase the pressure on Iran. Remember, the price of oil has collapsed in the interim, so the sanctions would be twice as effective. It is the only way to avoid capitulation on the one hand or war on the other.
All right, so
Obama refuses to do it.
You're suddenly elected in a write-in vote president of the United States in 2016. Krauthammer wins across the board, even though he doesn't even campaign.
Exactly.
They write his name in there.
It's because I'm so popular. I understand that.
And brilliant, and we'll get you new ties. But other than that, you're in. So you're President Krauthammer. What do you do in this, and then you take a time machine back to tomorrow, Tuesday? What do you do?
So what I do is I tell the Iranians that we are not offering them, as in the current offer, 6,500 centrifuges, which would allow them a vigorous nuclear program. We tell them that we are either going to go to no enrichment, which is what is demanded in 6 UN Security Council resolutions, or as a way to save their face, they can have a token program of a few hundred machines. But that's it. And that's going to be our offer. And we would be willing to legitimize the regime in those circumstances. They have to allow inspection, and they have to account for the past programs.
And they say no, President Krauthammer, and then what do you do?
We tell them in advance, we are going to hit you with the hardest sanctions ever devised. Your economy is going to be squeezed. You will not be able to do any transactions in the West. The oil embargo is still on, and you are going to be destabilized. And they remember that the Shah's regime collapsed in 1979 when the merchants in the street turned against the regime. And that's what was happening 18 months ago with the economy in collapse. And they understand that. Now, I'm not saying it's going to work necessarily, but it is the best chance that we have, and Obama instead is offering a capitulation.
Charles Kratham, everybody. Next on the write down. In the beginning of the ISIS surge, President Obama said arming Syrian fighters might solve some of the problem. Wait till you hear how that's worked out. And later, Megyn Kelly on a big lawsuit involving cable networks and Al Sharpton. Factors coming right back.